If you're a parent and you have wondered whether a therapist helped drive your family farther apart by suggesting or supporting an adult child's estrangement, you're not alone in that thought. Therapists are being talked about more lately in connection with estrangement. And there's this growing concern that some therapists may be too quick to hear an adult child's account of a difficult family relationship and conclude the parent's toxic. They're a narcissist. The adult child needs stronger boundaries, or even to go ahead and cut the family off. But there's a real danger in jumping into that camp too quickly. I'm Sheri McGregor. I am author of the Done with the Crying series of books for parents of estranged adult children and other books for parents of estranged adult children, as well as founder of rejectedparents.net. And I've been working with parents of estranged adult children since 2013 and talking about this subject since then, too. Over the years, I've heard from thousands of parents who were bewildered by what happened. Sometimes they're given no explanation at all. Other times, they're presented with an entirely different interpretation of family history, one that they barely recognize, if at all. And yes, sometimes a therapist has helped to shape or reinforce the revision of family history, or even advised the adult child that the best solution is just to cut off the family. Sometimes that's because a parent, or excuse me, a therapist is jumping into this psychology bandwagon that has really kind of been blaming parents for a very, very long time, especially mothers. And I talk more about that and the history of that in psychology in Beyond Done with the Crying. And therapists bring their own histories and assumptions to their work too. I've said before that in our culture, therapists sometimes occupy a role that was once held by elders, people who were expected to bring wisdom, perspective, and restraint. But credentials don't automatically provide those qualities. Elder wisdom gained through life experience today is sometimes replaced by TikTok therapists who may have an agenda and speak in shareable sound bites that convince people that all their problems are due to their parents who are toxic or narcissist, or the list goes on. And before I go on, I do want to say there's some wonderful, wonderful therapists out there. My point here is not to knock therapy or knock therapists, but as I share in a personal story in Beyond Down with the Crying, I learned early on that not every person in a position of authority is working from a helpful place. Anyone who's in the helping field should first be curious. And that leads me to another part of the subject that I've been talking about publicly since 2013. And that is that sometimes parents themselves go to therapists for help when this happens in their families. And they're immediately met with these same sorts of assumptions, that if adult child rejects a parent, then, there's a reason and it's horrible and it's the parent's fault. And even if there's no identified reason, the parent is sometimes encouraged to keep reaching out, keep trying to find the right words, to write these blanket apologies that really guess at a problem, right? And as a result, they keep getting the door slammed in their face or enduring more blame, ridicule, abuse, and that's faulty therapy too. So, whether a therapist is quickly telling an adult child or agreeing, your family is toxic, or they're telling a parent, you need to keep trying because you must have contributed to this. You're the parent. It's up to you to fix this. You know, it, regardless of which, caution really applies here because estrangement is complex. Quick assumptions can be wrong and they can cause real harm. These assumptions can cause a therapist to miss something very important, and that is mental illness. Missing mental illness is especially concerning because some of the changes that accompany psychiatric illness may initially look like family conflict. Things like blaming other people, suspicion, rigidity in thinking, impulsivity that leads to family conflict, paranoia that the family is against them, or revisions to family history that just aren't true. All of these can be a part of a psychiatric illness. And a therapist who already views family conflict through a particular lens may hear those complaints as confirmation rather than asking whether something else might be going on, rather than being curious, rather than staying open to ideas about what might really be happening. So, when this is the case, the real issue gets missed. Instead, the story is reinforced, and the person in front of them then doesn't get help that they need. Instead, their story is supported with something awful, estrangement. If accusations and blame are taken at face value without considering a fuller picture of psychiatric change, the opportunity for proper assessment is gone. It's lost. And then what? And then what? The person in front of them not only doesn't get professional assistance that they really need, but the family is alienated from them. Research on serious mental illness recognizes the value of family involvement. A loving family can be instrumental sometimes in someone getting treatment or sticking with it. They may notice relapses and help the person to notice. They may provide transportation to get to appointments. The list goes on of what a family can do. And so, no wonder the research supports that a family helps when there's serious mental illness. But when a person is unstable, and that's missed because the therapist is too quick to accept a blame the family explanation and encourage disconnection, the unstable person grows more distant. And while the distance grows, the psychiatric problems may also worsen. It's it's very sad. It's a very sad thing. Sometimes those people end up self-medicating, and then that further complicates any diagnosis as well as any possibility for reconciliation. Sometimes the estranged person becomes increasingly unwell, using drugs or alcohol, even eventually ending up on the street. And by then, what may once have looked like just a family conflict is clearly something much more serious. But 5 or 10 or 15 years may have passed, and the person the parent once knew then feels like a stranger to them. That person's thinking and behavior might even be frightening. The parents may desperately want them helped, but may have reasons to be fearful for bringing them into their home. And let's face it, while time is passing, the parents got older. Sometimes they no longer have the resources or the ability or the strength that they might have had earlier. So missing those earlier signs can be tragic. And I do believe that in some cases, when a bigger psychiatric problem is missed, and then the family is labeled and dismissed, an opportunity for intervention is lost. Years later, the consequences of untreated illness, substance abuse, isolation, even homelessness can be a lot harder to address. It's sad. It's very sad. Of course, I'm not saying that, all people who reject their families or disown them are mentally ill. That's not the point of this video. But I am making the point that if therapists and society are so quick to blame parents, some people fall through the cracks. Once the family or the parent is labeled as toxic, narcissistic, controlling, unsafe, they're also labeled as less than credible. So, even when there's family therapy where parents and an adult child go to therapy, which I hear about often, the family says this person has radically changed, but the therapist has already sometimes accepted this idea. The family is toxic. And so, therefore, the family's concern about the person's change is seen more as evidence of their toxicity. They're not believed. So the people who love and want to help the family get thrown away. And yes, that sometimes does occur because of therapists. I hear the stories, and it's pretty troubling because a person for whom cutting off the family is a symptom can end up isolated and without support. So I'll end this by returning to the point that estrangement is complex. I encourage therapists to consider more than their immediate reaction. Ask questions, be curious so that something more serious isn't missed. And I'll say that therapists would be right to also question themselves, to take notice when their bias might be getting in the way of their work. Cutting off one's family it's a major decision, and sometimes the estrangement is only a presenting problem. It's a symptom of something that takes skill and effort to discern, not some quick assumption that you agree with. Sometimes estrangement is a symptom. And I want to make clear, you know, sometimes the family isn't the illness. They're just watching the symptoms unfold. Competent mental health care should be curious enough to figure out the difference. Thank you for watching. And if you find this helpful, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. I've also added a few links in the description to other articles dealing with therapy at rejectedparents.net. Bye for now. I'll see you soon.